All right. Uh, for recording sake, hello everyone and welcome. This is the Flamingo Cycle PTG, and we're off with a retrospective. And this is just feedback for the TC if things are going fine or if there are some issues that we need to address. Uh, we our TC terms roughly coincide with the release cycles, so it helps to have something like this kick off at the beginning of the release cycle, so we kind of know what we're working towards through this release cycle. So as far as topics go, there are some hints of what we want to talk about, such as are we lacking any specific areas where we've not really looked at, where we probably did not spend time searching and building knowledge across the teams. And we didn't, probably craft something into a project team guide that caused a discussion and probably lacks an effective resolution at the end of it. Um, and we also talk. Let's also spare some time to talk about some of the other things that TC does, such as the meetings and the format of these meetings. And the TC sets aside investment opportunities and other things. So it's a free for all topic for the next 50 minutes. So feel free to add topics. Feel free to raise your hands and step in when the conversation is if of the previous topic is ended, and we can pick them up and start taking notes. And the rest of the day today, we will be talking about two other things. One is the TC goals, and then the maintenance of unmaintained branches. And that would be at 14:30, and we'll wrap up with that topic. So that's just these three topics today. But there's a lot to pack in those three. Let's probably start diving in. Uh, at this point, I think the prompt was, how are we doing on effectiveness? I think I was researching that the TC tag being used on the OpenStack mailing list, and how much of that was really a closed issue. And I suppose, some of those were hard to answer, but some others we've not really made a lot of progress on. There are some things that we did do as well this cycle. I think we wrapped up the securing of the PyPy accounts and such, and we've gotten some effectiveness on resolving gate issues across the board through effort from the past several cycles. And another good thing I think was the constant work on elections and team changes and so on, that we are able to work with other organizations, get hold of trackers, work with our own project teams, making sure that PTL nomination periods are actually being effective, and we're having less and less leaderless teams. I wouldn't say less and less, but less and less of a problem with leaderless teams, I think, because we've had about four teams that didn't have leaders in the past two election cycles. Um, and so, but I think the outreach has been somewhat useful there. But anybody wants to pipe in here and start adding any topics where we may have or we may not have been effective in this past cycle? And with that, I guess a browser change made my color go away. My bad. I think one area where I thought that we were less effective were things like legal questions, which popped up a couple of times over mailing list discussions. And it was around, licensing and things. I wasn't sure if we answered those questions effectively, whether it was licensing for, you know, packages that included in things that that teams are shipping, or it was about, adding copyrights or removing copyrights from code and so on. Um, the removing copyrights code was probably answered, but I don't recall. There was a recent discussion, but I'm not very sure if the project team was happy with that resolution.
Yeah, I think I remember now saying I would try to get some additional information added to um, the licensing FAQ in the project team's guide.
Yeah.
Maybe try to reorganize that a bit because it's still just what we copied directly out of the wiki article like 8-9 years ago.
Yeah. And the wider question was, I mean, beyond those FAQs, I mean, regarding licensing itself, we do fall back to the Open Infra Foundation folks, I suppose. I mean, beyond stuff that we could provide guidelines for, um, because all of us are not lawyers. I'm not sure if any of us are, and it would be hard to keep up with any changes that are happening, or delve into any complicated areas regarding open source licensing and such. Is that still a good model where we'd defer back to Open Infra and ask for help?
Yeah, I mean the the Open Infra Foundation does have legal representation who can weigh in on those sorts of questions and who are very familiar with open source intellectual property law. Um, so it's that's still the preferred escalation path if we don't have clear policies that say how we should treat a particular situation.
Yeah,
The Doug's Holiday Inn Express idea is good too.
makes sense. So I think we can at least take an AI on that, which is to revisit the FAQs with these recent issues that have showed up. And for the rest of the team, I presume to get to, to be aware so that they can help with anything and stem it in code reviews if something is a repeated pattern and so on.
Yeah. Also, if people who are on the TC are interested in these specific topics, I recommend subscribing to the Legal Discuss at list.openstack.org mailing list. It is super low volume, like it maybe gets a few posts a year tops, but that's where these things are sometimes escalated before handing them off to the foundation uh, legal representation. So it's a good place to keep an eye on, that these things might sometimes crop up there before they make an appearance on OpenStack Discuss or other sorts of places.
Makes sense. Now, for the tough questions, is there anything that we're hesitating to say? Please feel free to add to the list over here, specifically around areas where you thought that the TC was not effective in reaching a solution. Perhaps those would be nice to discuss. All right. Uh, if there isn't anything else on that, let's move on to the next prompt, which is uh, regarding the project team guide. I suppose we have some stale content and things that we could improve upon over there. I mean, continuing the legal discussion topic, I suppose it was around the dependencies, optional modules, legal issues, FAQ. These are things that we have published to the project teams um, for their benefit and to all contributors basically. And this is also the source of questions many times. And I think this is what we would refresh with the fallout of the previous topic there. And yeah, the other one that I had out here was we have some stale content, as with any documentation that we start writing. Um, it probably quickly gets outdated, and this, I guess, would be straightforward to remove. We used to do sprints, I suppose, and it's no longer relevant. But the next one is interesting. I think we've specifically called out how PTL duties were supposed to be handed off. Um, and we have also seen how this does not really happen as far as our OpenStack project teams are concerned. It could be many reasons out there, but one of the things that we were recommending PTLs to do was to actually encourage a rotation, and then also to make sure that the community knows that you're stepping away when you are finishing up, and that you're actually somewhat mentoring the next PTL perhaps, and be available to assist and things. But that doesn't translate to reality a lot because of circumstances at the moment. But I was just wondering if there were any suggestions that were happening around project teams, perhaps um, around this whole handover of PTL duties. For the TC, this has been something of an issue because again, finding out all of the project context when somebody has stepped away, when the original maintainers have stepped away, and this has happened multiple times. Um, and there have been times where folks in the TC have stepped in to do some maintenance because we thought that the project team still had um, you know some relevance.
Um, at least for Nova, with a specific PTL documentation. So in general, for example, for René, I provided the documentation for him, and then we discussed in between him and I. I mean, if you want, I can provide the PTL. Yeah. Genova, Genova.
Yeah,
Basically, that's why I think. But I mean, it would be difficult to explain how to be a new PTL for every for every event, sorry, for every project. I mean, if we need to provide us a doc for all of the projects, it would be difficult because in general for the PTL, it's different in between every project. But what we could do is probably ask for every project whether there are some specific documentations for new PTLs. So then, basically, for the project team guide, then we could be saying, okay, if for example, if you look at Nova, this is this one. If you look at for Neutron, this would be that other stuff, etc., etc.
yeah. I think that was the aspect between the two guides. And one thing I do not see in this guide is what you folks did in Nova. I think, which was pretty cool. So the PTL was a contributor that was not yet a core reviewer, but I think it was very nice to see them step up, um, and how the team is dealing with that, which is that you don't really need a core reviewer to be a PTL all the time. It could be a non-core reviewer as well, somebody that is working their way into the core team perhaps. So that would be something nice to call out into this guide, I think, because it feels like it was something that teams are finding useful.
Well, I would say is the sorry about my English. I mean, I would say it's different in between the projects. Like every team. I mean, for every team, it's different, right? Because for example, for Nova, yeah, the fact that René was not a core was like a question, but also, I mean, can run. Anyone can run for being the next PTL. That was just because René was the only guy that was wanting to be the next PTL. But anyway, I would say that that's definitely different in between projects.
So
This is more about.
Glance did it years ago. It was a little bit weirder in Glance because in Glance only the PTL can plus W specs.
Oh.
So we have this kind of weird situation where the PTL can't approve code, but is the one required to, approve specs. So I was also interested in that as a solution when Glance did it. And it was better than not having a PTL, but I think it has. There have been some, good and bad things about it. It'll be interesting to see how it goes with Nova. It's certainly a solution to the problem, but
Yeah, I mean, I would say I mean, again, it's different in between projects, but at least for Nova, it's different. I mean, the PTL, I would say, the fact that cores basically review specs and implementations is different than a PTL. I mean, I would say what I did as a PTL was not related to review some stuff, but it was not like it was more like I just try to help the folks for example for something like I mean I just I just doing I was just doing some paper. I was just doing some paper on that. That's basically it. But yeah, I agree with you, Dan. We will see exactly for PTG what will happen with a non-core PTL if we need to have a specific core for a PTG discussion or something like that. But for the moment, I would say, given this is more, I mean, in Nova paperwork support to be a PTL.
yeah,
I
that
don't see
was
any problems yet.
that was the reason I thought that it would be fine in the Glance case, to have somebody do the paperwork and the meeting scheduling and the this kind of stuff that wasn't a core. In reality, I think that we I mean we lost a little bit of kind of team cheerleader as well. It just the paperwork. I think the paperwork and the implementation stuff basically ended up diverging a little bit more than I was kind of expecting as a result of that. Nova is definitely a more active team with more strong, people working on their own things and whatever. So it's probably not as big of a deal there. But yeah, I don't know. I almost felt like that it would be better to based on the Glance experience to have just gone the DPL route where it was kind of explicitly everyone's responsibility, you know what I mean, instead of taking that other option. I mean, it certainly has not been a disaster or anything like that. It just from my kind of vantage point, DPL may have empowered more people and thus resulted in a slightly better situation. But we didn't try it, so we don't know.
Yeah, actually, you're making a good point. We will see anyway next PTG whether it would be a problem. For the moment, I at least as far as I know, for Nova this is the first time. For Glance, I knew about the fact that the previous Glance PTL was not a core. Do we have any other projects that have PTLs not being core? That's just a question if people know, because what we could do is basically by the next PTG in 6 months, look whether it's important or not.
Yeah. So we've had aspects where I think we've added the PTL to the core right after the elections.
Yeah, yeah.
I can find you those examples, but there are also there are teams where I think when they were making the nomination, they realized that they had to have a a contribution in the project, and that happened. So evidently they were not core as well.
But I mean, the reason this topic came up, right, was you were asking if we should put this into the project team guide as like a
Yep.
good idea, right? And um, maybe Renee will turn it into a good idea. But I guess at the moment, I would probably not go encouraging other people to do this, except for specific situations where, you know, the team dynamic was such that, they thought it was a good idea or whatever. I just wouldn't like probably hold it up as a good solution until we have, you know, maybe more data that it is. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I do agree on the fact that we need more data before documenting that, because that's not. I mean, it's not, as I said, it's not really a Nova discussion, because René was already working on Nova. So, I mean, people were knowing him, etc., etc. So, that's just because the team, I mean, I would say, yeah, I would prefer to have some specific data. Maybe other projects would prefer to just have a PTL doing some administration, and that's it. But we couldn't be recommending that as a way for all the projects. That's my main concern. I mean, if projects prefer to have a project manager as a PTL, that's their team quorum, or rather their team consensus. But that doesn't mean that we will say for all the project that a PTL is a project project manager-ish or something like that, right?
Okay, agreed. I can take that note. But any other further thoughts to add to this?
But aren't we going to kind of territory of DPL if ETL just a project manager? Because then he also kind of well, he either need to appoint release liaison um, or how does this will work basically, or he should be really aware of all like policies regarding releasing as well, which is not pure project manager kind of thing.
So I think right now in the PTL guide, we are already recommending the PTL, hand off any responsibilities to other project contributors. Like for example, the release thing that you said. So in case they're not comfortable or they're too overwhelmed to do it, too busy to do it, they could already task a release liaison.
But how it's different from DPLs then? That's what
DPL
I'm
would be,
like
yeah, is
thinking.
your the team is forced to, like, staff a bunch of liaisons for sure. But with the PTL model, we're just encouraging sharing the responsibilities.
There's also the the letter and the spirit of the law, right? In the PTL model, it's easy to fall into the last, 13 years of behavior, and that the PTL is responsible unless somebody else is, and DPL, um, you know, you've got to have a few of the specific liaisons, um, but then, like, outside of those responsibilities, if something comes up, someone's got to do it, someone's got to step up and whatever. There's not like a default, everything slides downhill to the PTL kind of a thing. That's sort of what I meant by, you know, empowering, encouraging people to do more of the stuff. Whereas if you've got the PTL, it's like obviously that person if there's not somebody else. So
Yeah, okay, probably makes sense indeed.
All right. Any further thoughts on this PTL discussion before we move to the next topic here? Uh, we're still in the retro. The next thing would be around the project communication recommendation, or we can switch to that if there's nothing more to be said about the PTL stuff. Okay. Project communication. We've had this topic, I think, in the past, and it's become, it's been somewhat of a problem that we have not been able to solve. In the project communication recommendation, we've said that all project communication has to be happening in public forums. There ought to be, if there are meetings, they ought to be happening in public forums. And we've called out IRC a bunch in this project team guide, but reality does not match that recommendation. Uh, or guideline basically, where we've seen that several project teams, they have an IRC channel, but the conversation does not happen on that IRC channel. um, and it's hard to find PTLs, for instance, when the TC or the release team wants some answers via IRC. They would have to resort to using the mailing list, or there's no way to have a synchronous or continuous discussion, and sometimes even the mailing list is not helpful with some PTLs. Um, Case in point, I think I was trying to get the Skyline team to meet with us sometime this week, um, and one the time zones don't match. Most of the contributors are far east, where we ought to have a session in a time zone that's better to them, better caters to them. So I think asynchronous communication is probably the key there. The other is they told me that this medium of communication, which is by video and using English to talk to each other, would be uncomfortable for them. They would be open to meeting with us once, but we would have to have hand them a bunch of questions that we were going to ask, so they can be prepared on how to communicate on this medium. Well, that probably also is one of the reasons why they probably don't engage on IRC, uh, because we do see acknowledgement of things when we ask, but we're not seeing a two-way communication on say IRC. So I don't have very bright ideas. I think in the past we've actually used different platforms to engage with different contributors, but that's nothing official. It's just doing one-off things.
I feel like I've also noticed, just in my circles, more people having more communication, more discussions in private or behind corporate firewalls or whatever, as probably you would expect from kind of a coalescing into larger groups instead of as many smaller, groups of contributors that we used to have. And not for any particular reason, just like other conversations happen in other places, and so some project communication ends up happening in other places, and it definitely feels like it has hollowed out the upstream channels. So is your suggestion to specifically put talk in IRC about project stuff as a recommendation for teams? Is that what you're leaning towards? Gotham.
And again, something I mentioned like before, but I failed to execute any action on that is try to more promote MetaMost breach. Oh, not MetaMost, sorry, Matrix breach, because apparently IRC is not very popular for reasons that you need to have a bouncer or something like that. So it might make sense that maybe it will be more encouraging for people to use Matrix Breach more.
Yeah, the problem is that people tend to write paragraphs in a single message, and then we just get a link that says, "Here, go read my message in a browser," which is
Yes,
pretty frustrating. So, um, but
that is true.
Gotham, I was asking you a question specifically.
Yeah, yeah. So one of my things was to try to get project team meetings to happen. Um, Even if they are there are folks working for a single company. I mean, something ought to be happening in the in the public space so that they can attract other contributors and try
Yeah,
to diversify their contributor base. So at least have the aspect of having team meetings or office hours or whatever makes sense for them in the public. And
yeah.
and the best medium for that, the most accessible one was IRC. But as Dimitri said, maybe people are having issues, running IRC off of their corporate firewalls and stuff like that. So yeah, so we're back
So,
in a pickle.
sorry. I mean, there are two. I mean, there are two situations here. Um, the I mean, the there are, if you prefer, there are two different problems. The first problem is, as it was said by Dan, people just forget to discuss upstream because, for example, they use other stuff for discussing in between people. So voilà. So at least I would say that we should be providing some. I would prefer to have some specific recommendation to say no, please, please, please definitely look at IRC. That's the first problem, and I think I would definitely prefer to have a recommendation for that to say IRC. The other problem is technical. I'm not saying all of us, but some people have problems using IRC, which I could be understanding. Apart from that minority, as far as I know, our community continues to use IRC. So that's why I would prefer to have the recommendation. And basically, if you're not able to use IRC, then at least you can use the mailing list. That at least I think every contributor can discuss by the mailing list. If people really want to discuss with the team and are not able to look at they're not able to use IRC, then they should be telling us. And then if, for example, if we see that it's not only for it's basically if you see that a lot of contributors want to discuss with us, then we know that it's a larger problem that we need to find. But for the moment, as far as I know, it's just a minority of people having problems using IRC. So that's why I would prefer to have a recommendation, and by this recommendation to say, if you're not able to technically use IRC, please tell us.
That's a good point. I wonder if we could actually. Do you suggest surveying uh, across the contributor base? Is that what you're recommending, or just do this case by case where we're not able to find, like we're not able to talk to a project team, or we see that project communications are not public, only poll that particular team.
I think that we will. Well, I guess I don't want to poll because I'm expecting everybody to prefer, their specific GChat, WhatsApp, Matrix, whatever thing all the time, right? Like IRC is a pretty, um, baseline in terms of features and baseline in terms of, established technology and all of that kind of a thing. So I don't know. I expect that, you start sampling, you're going to regret it personally, but um, and I think we tried one time.
The problem is that we are missing really quite some teams from IRC right now. Not even active teams. I realize that Heat channel is completely empty, for instance, while Heat is kind of, still quite good maintained, I would say, by Takashi. But um, and problem with mailing lists that you really, I sometimes hesitate to write in mailing list for specific team because you never know if there is anybody like it's like sent into the void, and the feeling is somehow, I don't know, not
But
pleasant inside.
but Dimitri didn't.
Mhm.
Sorry, didn't you
No,
just
no, go.
say that it's that Heat is well maintained by Takashi? Isn't that what you said?
Yeah,
But I mean, like he's on IRC everywhere else all the time, right? So I don't think that the lack of discussion in a Heat channel is because Takashi doesn't want to use IRC or anything, right? It might just be that Takashi doesn't feel necessary to converse with himself.
yeah,
I don't know
sure,
who
but
else.
when there is like a contributor to Heat, and so I was reached by one, that, oh well, how I should like ask for like how I get the ball rolling basically with Heat, because there was nobody there and people not necessarily know where to find Takashi and who Takashi is, right?
But was the
And
question
then
posted?
like moving teams, another thing I wanted to actually say is that like among like people I interact with, it's very frequent that they like happen to fear to write to ARC or discuss some changes publicly because of some kind of imposter syndrome. Because I cannot explain it otherwise, that there are very like important developers sitting in ARC rooms, and they won't dare to bother them with their like useless or not useless, but not that valuable contributions. That is another like aspect of like, oh well, barriers that people build inside themselves, reaching out to teams or to discuss some projects. So they prefer to discuss it internally and then, until it's kind of done.
Yeah, but like that's that's why a lot of us that are very visible end up having to answer the same question 100 times in private chat because people ping us directly and like, hey, I see your name in a lot of places. I have a random question about Nova that, you can probably answer, even about stuff that I don't even know about, but like they just see my name everywhere, and so they ping me privately, and and then I have to either tell them like I'll answer that if you ask it in the public channel, or answer it the same thing a whole bunch of times. So like I I understand that like people are shy, but this is not like a new thing, and I don't know. I would much rather try to encourage people. Like maybe we need specifically text that says if you have a question about a project and you're not sure who to ask, just go to the channel and ask it. And you may not recognize the nicks of the people that are around, but like if anyone knows the answer, they will respond. And if they know who you should ask instead, they will respond. And like it's okay or something. I don't know, but like I definitely feel like at the other end of that that pipeline where I end up having to just like answer direct pings with please go ask this in the channel and then I will help you. You know what I mean? And that like puts load on me.
Yeah, totally. Also, on this note, I found that large part answers are kind of useful in some cases, but probably it's not applicable to all projects.
I will also say, and sorry, Sylvan, I know your hand is up, but one thing that I think has been a very big improvement that some of the projects have adopted is having the meeting in their channel. Like we have a lot less general IRC traffic than we used to, right? It used to be that if you had a question in heat, you would join that channel in the middle of 4 conversations and there was a whole bunch of activity going on and you could kind of like get the idea that like, you didn't just blow into a Wild West town and a tumbleweed went by, but like that there are people there. Um, and I think that probably helped people realize that like, oh, I see, I need to merge into traffic here and ask my question. And so like Nova and the TC and various other groups, have their meeting in their channel so that at least there is some bulk of discussion that happens in the channel at least once a week, right? And Glance decided not to do that. I was for it, but as a result, like the most like human to human discussion that happens ever in Glance happens not in Glance's channel. It happens in OpenStack meeting. And if you go back and look, there are weeks where there's nothing but the Zulbot posting in the Glance channel and no humans, right? And so even if you camp out in that channel and listen for a while, it seems like it's just a read-only status channel for Zul to talk about patch proposals, right? So like encouraging teams to go back to their channel and have their meeting there, I think would also make it look like someone lived here at some point in the last week. You know what I mean?
I pretty much like this idea.
Awesome. Sylvain?
Yeah, I would just add that, like for example, for PTGs or specs review, in general, it's important as a reminder. We discussed about PTLs, for example, but in general, this is difficult. For example, it was difficult for me sometimes to look at some project because we wanted to ask them to review some spec that we had from Nova, and it was difficult for me just to go on IRC on the channel and not exactly knowing who was there. So I know that I can ping people by other way, but for example, I don't know every project's community. At least for Nova, there is not only one company working on Nova. There are multiple companies working with Nova, and I would be afraid if I was in another company to not exactly knowing what my team was doing. Every time we say, if you don't want to work on some community, then that's what you need to do, and we'll help you. But if we say if we don't recommend to use IRC, a new contributor could exactly know what people do. That works for a new contributor, that works for any other contributor from other projects.
Yeah, I guess you're saying, I mean, because it's consistent across all of the project teams, it becomes easier for work to be done in general.
That plus maybe people don't remember that our RC channels are logged as well.
Mhm.
Which means that if you really want to remember what you discussed 2 weeks before, anyone can just look at the logs and see that.
And also they can look at the logs and see, did any flesh and bone humans say anything in this channel in the last week? Oh yes, well at least they had a meeting.
I mean, if I was a new contributor, I would at least look at when Nova is discussing. I will see that I will see the meeting schedule. I will see the meeting details, and then I will see the logs as well. So voilà. So I mean, for a new contributor, this is just. I mean, I know lots of new contributors don't really know about IRC because I'm pretty too old, and that's probably. I mean, probably new contributors don't really know IRC, but the real reason why we continue to use IRC is not because we love IRC. This is just because from
It's a good baseline.
12, yeah, exactly. It's a simple baseline. Like anyone can use IRC. You don't need to have a specific machine. You can just go to IRC.
You can just use netcat on a TCP port if you want,
Yeah.
minimum.
All right, we have 4 minutes to the end of the hour where we have to wrap up this retrospective. There are quite some more ideas and thoughts over there, but I think we have to call it, and we can discuss them later in the week if we have some time, or push them out to TC weekly meetings. But for now, is there anything else that folks want to add to the minutes? I'll compile these recommendations and action items after, but is there anything else for these next 3 minutes? Right. Please feel free to add your own thoughts if you'd like, because all of that will get read and munched into a minutes at the end. So, all right, I think we can take a couple of minutes of a break and come back at 1400 UTC, and we're going to catch up on our goals and the status of them. So feel free to be off of the thing for a couple of minutes. Stretch. I'll see you here in a couple of minutes. All right. Let me stop the recording and restart it for this session.